What if I told you the US government spent over $20 million teaching people to see things with their minds? Not cameras, not satellites, just human consciousness, and they did it for decades. Let that sink in. $20 million of taxpayer money, classified programs, declassified documents, real people sitting in dark rooms, describing locations they'd never visited, events they couldn't possibly know. If you're thinking this sounds like science fiction, I get it. I thought the same thing, but here's the thing. The CIA doesn't spend $20 million on science fiction. The Pentagon doesn't create entire units based on fantasy. So what exactly is remote viewing? And more importantly, why did the most powerful military on Earth take it so seriously? Let's dive in. Remote viewing is essentially the ability to perceive people, places, or events that are physically distant from you, without using your normal five senses. No phone, no internet, no telescope. Just your mind. Imagine sitting in a room in Virginia and describing in perfect detail a secret Soviet submarine base in the Arctic, or a hostage situation in the Middle East, or a crashed aircraft in the jungle. Sounds impossible, right? But here's where it gets wild. The military didn't just experiment with this, they operationalized it. They created protocols, they trained people, they ran missions, and some of those missions produced results that are genuinely hard to explain away. The story really begins in the 1970s. The Cold War was raging. The US and the Soviet Union were locked in an intelligence arms race, and both sides were exploring the fringes of human capability. The Soviets had been researching psychic phenomena for years. The Americans couldn't afford to fall behind. Even if the science was uncertain, the potential payoff was enormous. What if you could spy on the enemy without satellites? What if you could locate hostages without risking lives? What if you could predict attacks before they happened? Enter Project Stargate. This was the umbrella program that housed the US government's remote viewing efforts. It ran from the 1970s all the way to 1995. It wasn't some fringe operation hidden in a basement. It was a legitimate, funded, staffed program run by the Defense Intelligence Agency. And the people involved weren't crystal-wearing mystics. They were military officers, intelligence analysts, and scientists. One of the most famous was Joseph McMoneagle, Army veteran, intelligence officer, remote viewer. He's credited with some of the most stunning successes in the program's history. In one documented case, McMoneagle was tasked with locating a Soviet plane that had crashed in Africa. The intelligence community had no idea where it was. Using remote viewing, McMoneagle described the location in remarkable detail. A team was sent to investigate. They found the plane, exactly where he said it would be. Coincidence? Maybe, but this happened repeatedly. Not every time, not perfectly, but often enough that the people running the program couldn't dismiss it. Now, I know what you're thinking. If this was real, why did they shut it down in 1995? Great question. And the answer is more complicated than you might expect. The official reason was that the program wasn't producing consistent, reliable intelligence that justified the cost. And that's partly true. Remote viewing was unpredictable. Some sessions were stunningly accurate. Others were completely wrong. There was no way to guarantee results. But here's what most people don't know. The CIA didn't just walk away because it didn't work. They walked away because the results were too inconsistent to be operationally useful. That's a very different thing. It's the difference between something being impossible and something being unreliable. Remote viewing, according to the declassified reports, produced hits that were statistically significant. That means it performed better than random chance. But in the intelligence world, better than random isn't good enough when lives are on the line. So they shut it down. But they didn't debunk it. They didn't prove it was fake. They just couldn't control it. And here's the kicker. Many of the people who worked in the program still believe in it. McMoneagle still teaches it. Other veterans still consult on it. They didn't become skeptics after leaving. If anything, they became more convinced. So what does the science actually say? This is where things get really interesting. Because remote viewing has been tested in controlled laboratory settings, and the results are confusing. In the 1990s, the American Institutes for Research conducted a formal review of the Stargate program. Their conclusion? The program had produced some results that couldn't be easily explained by chance or fraud. But they also said the information wasn't useful enough for intelligence operations. Other researchers, like physicist Russell Targ and engineer Harold Puthoff, who actually ran the early remote viewing experiments at Stanford Research Institute, published peer-reviewed papers showing statistically significant results. Critics argue that the methodology was flawed, that the hits were cherry-picked, that the misses were ignored, and there's validity to some of those criticisms. But here's what keeps the debate alive. Even the skeptics acknowledge that something strange is happening. They just disagree on what it is. Is it psychic ability? Is it unconscious inference? Is it some form of quantum entanglement that we don't yet understand? Nobody knows for sure. And that's the point. Let me put this in perspective for you. We live in a world where we accept that subatomic particles can be entangled across vast distances. We accept that observing a particle changes its behavior. We accept that the universe is mostly made of dark matter and dark energy that we can't see, measure, or understand, but suggest that human consciousness might be able to access information beyond the five senses, and suddenly people call it pseudoscience. Does that make sense to you? I'm not saying remote viewing is proven. I'm not saying everyone can do it. I'm saying the universe is stranger than we pretend, and our understanding of consciousness is in its infancy. The military didn't invest $20 million because they were gullible. They did it because they saw something that demanded investigation. And even though they couldn't turn it into a reliable tool, they couldn't fully explain it away either. Here's another angle that most people miss. Remote viewing isn't just about spying. It raises profound questions about the nature of reality itself. If consciousness can access information without physical interaction, what does that say about the separation between mind and matter? What does that say about time and space? Some physicists have proposed that consciousness might be a fundamental property of the universe, not just a byproduct of the brain. If that's true, then remote viewing isn't magic. It's just a skill we haven't learned to use yet. Think about it. 200 years ago, the idea of radio waves would have seemed like witchcraft. Invisible signals traveling through the air? Impossible. Now we can't imagine life without them. What if remote viewing is just another frequency we haven't learned to tune into? Now, I want to address the elephant in the room. Can you learn remote viewing? The answer is yes and no. The protocols used by the military have been declassified and published. There are books, courses, and even apps that teach the techniques. The basic method involves quieting your mind, focusing on a target, and recording your impressions without analyzing them. Sounds simple. It's not. The military selected and trained people for years. They weeded out those who couldn't perform. Even among the successful viewers, consistency was a problem. So can you learn it? Probably. That's a different question. But here's what's fascinating. Even casual practitioners report surprising results. Images that match targets. Feelings that turn out to be accurate. It's not reliable, but it's not nothing. And that not nothing is what keeps people coming back. Let me tell you about a specific case that still gives me chills. In 1979, a remote viewer named Pat Price was tasked with describing a Soviet weapons facility. He wasn't given any information about the location, just a set of coordinates. Price described a massive underground facility. He drew detailed sketches of strange machinery. He described the layout with precision. Later, satellite imagery confirmed the existence of the facility. The sketches matched. The layout was correct. Price had never been to the Soviet Union. He had no access to classified intelligence, yet he described something that was later verified. How? The skeptics say he got lucky, or that he picked up on subtle cues, or that the match wasn't as perfect as claimed. But if you read the declassified documents, if you look at the actual sketches and compare them to the satellite photos, the resemblance is uncanny. This isn't a magic trick. This is a documented case in a government program, and there are dozens like it. So why does this matter to you? Because whether remote viewing is real or not, it forces us to confront the limits of our own understanding. We love to think we have the universe figured out. Physics explains matter. Biology explains life. Neuroscience explains consciousness. End of story. But what if that's just the surface? What if there's a layer beneath that we haven't even begun to explore? The military's investment in remote viewing wasn't a mistake. It was an admission of ignorance, an acknowledgement that there are phenomena we don't understand, and that ignoring them because they don't fit our current models is bad science. That's the real truth about remote viewing. It's not about psychics and crystal balls. It's about the humility to admit that we don't know everything. And in a world where we pretend to have all the answers, that humility is rare. Here's my challenge to you. Don't believe me. Don't believe the skeptics. Don't believe the believers. Go read the declassified documents yourself. They're available online. The Stargate archives, the AIR report, the research papers from Stanford Research Institute. Look at the evidence with your own eyes. Draw your own conclusions. Because the truth about remote viewing isn't simple. It's not, yes, it's real, or no, it's fake. It's a messy, complicated, fascinating gray area that sits at the intersection of science, psychology, and human potential. And that gray area is where the real discoveries happen. So what do you think? Is remote viewing just a Cold War curiosity, or is it a hint of something much bigger? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you want to go deeper, hit that subscribe button, because we're just getting started. The universe is stranger than we know, and the truth, it's always more interesting than the fiction.